Hello everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to be here with you today. We're about to explore some important guidelines for conducting research on race and racism in psychological science. The title of our presentation is Science-Informed Guidelines for Research on Race and Racism in Psychological Science, with a focus on forging diversity. Over the next few slides, we'll dive into how we can improve our research practices, promote diversity, and ensure our work is grounded in solid science. Let's get started. This slide highlights the need for a serious reassessment of how we conduct, report, peer review, and share psychological research across our field. It's a call to action that urges us to reflect on our practices and ensure they promote equity and integrity. In October 2021, the APA made a significant step by issuing a formal apology to communities of color. This was an acknowledgement of the role that psychology has played in perpetuating systemic racism over many decades. Historically, psychology has contributed to systemic inequities, sometimes actively promoting racist ideas, and often failing to challenge racial discrimination within research and practice. This legacy of harm calls for a critical and honest reckoning. We need to recognize this history and commit to meaningful change. Overall, this slide emphasizes that understanding our past is essential for building a more just and inclusive future in psychology. Let's talk about some of the structural barriers that discourage BIPOC researchers from entering and advancing in the field. These barriers help perpetuate gaps in psychological outcomes for these communities. When we look at exclusion of BIPOC scholars, we see that research on white populations is often treated as the norm or universal, while studies focused on BIPOC populations face stricter scrutiny or are considered less valid. This creates a bias in what research is valued and accepted. Additionally, theories and methods developed specifically from or for BIPOC groups are frequently sidelined or excluded from mainstream psychological literature. This means that the rich diversity and unique experiences of BIPOC communities aren't adequately represented or recognized. Current research practices can unintentionally reinforce white supremacy by prioritizing certain perspectives and marginalizing others. This not only distorts our understanding, but also flattens the complexity within BIPOC populations, ignoring the diversity that exists within these groups. Overall, these systemic issues contribute to the broader problem of systemic racism within psychological science. They hinder progress toward a more inclusive, accurate, and equitable understanding of human psychology. On this slide, I want to highlight how the APA has taken concrete steps toward promoting racial equity through its Racial Equity Action Plan and EDI framework. These initiatives show a real commitment to analyzing our institutional history, understanding past harms, and working to create a more just discipline. Specifically, the Equity Action Plan is a key part of this effort. Back in 2021, the APA adopted a resolution that defined 4 levels of racism. These levels help us understand how racism operates, from the individual level all the way up to societal structures. Let's briefly go through these levels. The first is structural racism, which refers to systemic inequities embedded across society, things like policies or norms that perpetuate disparities. Next is institutional racism, which occurs within organizations, often through policies or practices that sustain inequality. Then we have interpersonal racism, which happens in direct interactions between individuals, like biased behaviors or prejudiced comments. And finally, internalized racism, which involves personal beliefs and biases about race that individuals may hold internally without even realizing. Understanding these 4 levels is crucial because they serve as a roadmap for our efforts to dismantle racism. They guide us to target not just individual attitudes, but also the broader systems and policies that maintain inequality. Ultimately, this reflects the APA's strong commitment to racial equity, providing us with a clear framework to move forward thoughtfully and intentionally in building a more inclusive discipline. Transforming psychological research really begins with understanding who is at the table. It's about recognizing whose knowledge is shaping the questions we ask. If we want to create more accurate and meaningful science, we need diverse perspectives involved from the start. Building a more inclusive science means actively including voices from different backgrounds, experiences, and expertise. By doing so, we ensure our research addresses real-world issues more effectively and ethically. This idea ties directly into our overall goal of making psychology more equitable and representative. Remember, when we broaden our perspectives, we unlock richer insights and foster innovations that benefit everyone. Now, as we move to slide 6, I want to emphasize the importance of bridging the gap between laboratory findings and their real-world impact, especially for communities that are most in need. It's not enough to conduct research in isolation. We need to ensure that our findings actually benefit diverse populations. To do that, we have to consider intersectionality, understanding how race interacts with gender, class, sexual orientation, and other identities. Recognizing these overlapping identities helps us create more nuanced and effective interventions. Next, using representative samples is crucial. We need to reflect the true complexity and breadth of human experience. When our samples are diverse, our results become more applicable and meaningful across different communities. Fostering collaborative research teams is also key. Bringing together people from various racial, cultural, and disciplinary backgrounds enriches the research process and leads to more comprehensive insights. And of course, we must acknowledge and learn from the historical patterns of racial inequality embedded in scientific practice. Being mindful of past oppression helps us move toward more equitable and ethical science. All of these principles come together under the overarching goal of forging a more inclusive and impactful science, one that truly serves and uplifts everyone. Let's talk about the importance of actively addressing inequalities within our institutions. It's crucial that we don't rely solely on Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic samples as the universal standard. Instead, we need to challenge this weird bias, which can limit the relevance and inclusivity of our research. And I want to emphasize that this isn't a one-time effort. It's a continuous process that requires us to grow, stay humble, and constantly adapt our research practices. We must recognize that our own social positions, including race and ethnicity, influence how we design studies, interpret data, and understand findings. This is where being racially and ethnoculturally responsive becomes essential. By acknowledging how these factors shape our work, we can strive for more equitable and meaningful research outcomes. Finally, I encourage you all to recognize your own positionality, your background, biases, and perspectives, because awareness of these elements helps us conduct more responsible and inclusive research. Ultimately, developing research guidelines that promote responsiveness and equity is vital if we want our work to truly reflect and serve diverse populations. This ongoing commitment is key to advancing our field in a fair and just way. When we look at this slide, what we're really emphasizing is the importance of closing the gap between controlled research environments and the communities that truly rely on these scientific discoveries. It's about making sure that the insights we gain in the lab actually reach and benefit the people in their everyday lives. The phrase "from lab to life" captures this journey perfectly. It reminds us that science isn't just about experiments or data, it's about real-world impact. We want to see research translate into tangible improvements, whether that's better health outcomes, more effective interventions, or policies that truly serve communities. This connection is crucial because often, research can stay isolated in academic or clinical settings, and that limits its potential. Our goal should be to bridge that divide, ensuring that science is accessible, relevant, and directly beneficial to those who need it most. So, as we move forward, keep in mind that the ultimate purpose of our efforts is to make a meaningful difference, bringing science out of the lab and into the lives of the people it was meant to serve. Now, let's look at how requiring authors to include positionality and reflexivity statements can really enhance transparency. When researchers openly discuss how their own identities influence their work, it helps us understand potential biases and fosters trust in the scientific process. Reflexivity statements are a way to acknowledge that our perspectives shape the research we conduct. Moving on, journals have a crucial role here. They should encourage the use of diverse samples, promote inclusive and affirming language, and ensure that citation practices fairly credit BIPOC scholars. These steps are essential for making our research more equitable and representative of different voices. The APA's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Toolkit for Journal Editors is a valuable resource that offers concrete guidance. It helps editors embed equity into all their decisions, from manuscript review to publication practices. Finally, upholding equity in dissemination and review processes is key. It's about making sure that our publishing practices actively promote fairness and inclusivity, reinforcing the overall goal of creating a more just and diverse scholarly environment. All these efforts connect back to our overarching theme of advancing equity and transparency in research. The ultimate goal we're aiming for is a psychological science that truly benefits everyone in society and actively works to improve lives across all communities. When I say science for all, I mean creating a field that is inclusive, equitable, and accessible. Challenging inequity and upending the structural influence of white supremacy in academia isn't just a one-time effort. It's an ongoing, collective commitment. It requires persistent work from all of us, not just hitting a single milestone and calling it done. Moving beyond mere statements or symbolic gestures means we need to track real, concrete progress. This includes examining our research practices, ensuring publication standards are fair and inclusive, and increasing workforce representation from diverse backgrounds. Ultimately, this slide underscores that the future of psychological science depends on our collective actions and accountability. We must be intentional about making measurable changes, because only then can we truly create a field that benefits everyone and actively promotes social equity.